All right. Hey everyone, this is Rachel from the Yoga Experience, and I'm here with Jennie Pearl, who is going to be joining us soon in just a couple of weeks, visiting from the Bay Area and offering one of her signature workshops on yoga and social justice. And so welcome, Jennie.
Thank
And
you.
yeah, so the reason we're having this call, it started really naturally. Jennie and I were speaking earlier this morning, um, and I just felt a need to voice some questions and concerns I had about her workshop and just wanting to learn more about it. And we decided that there's probably a lot of you out there who have similar questions and concerns. So it would be great to just continue our conversation together online, and so that you can chime in as well. So, Jennie, do you have anything else to add?
I just want to add my gratitude for you, Rachel, for reaching out. I think a lot of times with this work of social justice and racial justice, there's kind of this, I don't know where to start. And then people often kind of get stuck in that. So I really appreciate you reaching out and asking questions and being curious and leaning into what might not be very clear yet. So I think that that curiosity is what birthed this conversation and this idea for recording this casual experience of talking about what the workshop's about, what it's not about, and so on. So just wanted to express some gratitude to you for that.
Yeah, definitely. And so I guess my main question I had this morning, and sort of what I'm still grappling with and trying to understand, is how this workshop, yoga and social justice, how it relates specifically to our Flagstaff community, and how how it will be relevant to people here in Flagstaff. I honestly feel like it's a pretty whitewashed and segregated sort of place, and so sometimes living here myself, I feel naive and ignorant to a lot of the issues that probably feel more relevant and in your face if you're living in different parts of the country. Like I was telling you earlier, I grew up back east, and in a city that's probably pretty close to having equal number of white and black people, and just a lot more diversity across the board. And so I feel like I'll see posts or news programs or people talking about race and social justice, and I almost forget sometimes how relevant it is to everyday life here. And kind of going off on a tangent, check in with you and see if you have any comments or
Yeah, I'm so glad that you brought that up, because I think that's a really real experience, having lived in Flagstaff for over a decade. Previously, I mean, we often talked about in Flagstaff that it's kind of a bubble, and on many aspects, not simply race and ethnicity, and that it is white dominated as a city. However, that does not mean there aren't people of color. And this came up a lot in last year's workshop that we did at the Yoga Experience. And I think what people see on my social media platforms is like, oh, Jennie's doing work around getting close to Blackness. Jennie must be working with the Black Lives Matter network and platform. And
an assumption I had.
yeah, and that's real. Like I am working avidly with a group that I'm a part of called Holistic Resistance. And yet we are primarily right now working with white people. We are primarily working in white dominated spaces. And regardless of how diverse Flagstaff is, or where I live in Oakland, in a very diverse community historically, my belief is that there's a lot of work for us to do in these communities. Otherwise, honestly, because this is my heart work and this is what I'm doing with my life, I wouldn't come to Flagstaff and the community if I didn't believe that there was some deep healing needed in the community. So there's kind of a couple things there. There's one of I really appreciate you bringing this aspect up, because I think when a lot of people look at the work I'm doing, they're like, oh, well, there's not as many Black people in Flagstaff, so maybe that isn't the workshop for me.
Mm-hmm.
And so I appreciate you naming that. And there are people of color in Flagstaff, as we know. And the Native community, the Latinx community, that conversation came up quite a bit in our workshop last year. And then the way I look at, why I am doing work directly with African heritage people right now is the history of slavery, the history in this country of racism and continued racism and oppression. My belief is that if we can reach, as white people, if we can reach for Black people and get close, chances are, because the way the systems of oppression have set us up against each other, the chances are of us being able to reach for Native communities, reach for Latinx communities. And so from the outside, if you might be wondering, like, why am I doing that? That's one of the reasons. So that is we can very much apply those tools and skills into what's most relevant for the Flagstaff community. That doesn't mean we're not going to be talking about anti-Blackness, that might not come up. But if we can do that work, then it's more easily translatable because, for example, like me as a white woman working with my co-facilitator, whose name is Aaron, who's an African heritage man, like we are set up to be against each other in these systems. So if we can work together and do that work, then the chances of us working in other ethnicities and other groups, it's much greater and actually a lot easier for many of us. So that's kind of that piece.
Yeah, and that's helpful to know and hear from you because I feel that some of the issues that are more relevant or like in your face in Flagstaff are, our challenges and just bridging gaps between our like white communities and Native American people and Hispanic people. And so I feel like hearing from you that it's all the same work is helpful to know. And so I guess my next question would be, how specifically do you see that relating to just, more of, I'm stumbling on my words now, more of what we're experiencing as a community here in Flagstaff. And I did mention to you, like, there are some groups here who are, big activists in the Native American community and even taking care of like our homeless population on the streets and reducing stigma and around that. Because to be honest, I feel like we see a lot of like Native people who are like living on the streets or asking for money. And then that creates like a resistance to even, I don't know, having relationships with Native people. And like, I'm just, I guess, recognizing some of my own perceptions and maybe misunderstandings. And I don't know, it's all feels very complex to me. And honestly, I think the reason I'm stumbling over my words is because, like we spoke of earlier, I feel intimidated just by like having these conversations, and it's really hard for me to talk about. And I think it is for a lot of people. And so maybe I could even segue into that, like people who are feeling a fear around having these sorts of conversations or doing something around the work of social justice, like maybe how you might put their mind at ease or show them like that it is more welcoming and inclusive and you're not going to be judged. And I know that just from knowing you and experiencing some of your workshops in the past, but it's hard to talk about. And I think it's hard for people to wrap their minds around like dedicating themselves to a long workshop that revolves around that.
So many good points here, Rachel.
Got past the rambling part.
That's real though. I think what you're modeling is just the realness of the discomfort and the realness of not knowing how to say it right, not knowing you know, like, and not having the, I'm imagining for you, experience to have conversations like this very often. Because like,
Sure.
it's like in yoga when we're practicing and we're like, okay, I've never done downward facing dog. Like your first downward facing dog is like, oh my gosh, so much to think about. Where do my hands go? I'm sweating, I'm slipping, like all those things. And slowly we build the muscle, we build the experience. And so exactly what you're speaking to, that fear of even coming into the conversation, is why the workshop is happening. It is
Mm-hmm.
meant for people that are having a similar experience of like, I think I want to do something, but I literally have no idea where to start. Or on the flip side, you know, I'm also hoping, like we had last year, some people from outside of the yoga experience community can come in who are already doing community work, can come in and also get the support of what does it mean to have a yoga practice and mindfulness practice that can also support this work. And so
Mm-hmm.
very
That
much
keeps
like you're,
coming up for me and thinking like, wow, how awesome would it be to be like going deep and having these conversations and then having the tool of yoga to like process and work through even the anxieties that come up, the sadness, and just that's kind of what I'm picturing is like the workshop will have these conversations and then we'll like dive into yoga, and that will be almost like a coping tool for dealing with the heaviness of the topic. That's, I don't know.
yes,
Yeah.
that's very much part of it. And kind of also at the same time, like starting with what I really reflected on from last year's workshop was I knew that this material of racial justice and yoga, social justice and yoga, was newer to most of the folks in the workshop. And I knew
Mm-hmm.
that in Flagstaff, it's a very different context than where I live here in Oakland, California now. And what
Mm-hmm.
I have to say is, because we were practicing mindfulness, because we were doing meditation, doing some writing, journaling, because we were doing those practices, what I witnessed was folks were really open. Folks were really tapped into like how they actually were feeling versus the group that I've been facilitating here for years now. We haven't had a space where practice in that way is as accessible or practical. And so even though I've been meeting with like groups of people for a long time at that point, every other week, what I was noticing in Flagstaff is the way that our yoga practice taps into our hearts allows us to go so much deeper, even if, you know, the majority of the folks in the room are newer to the material. So it's
Mm-hmm.
both, it both helps us access what's inside and what's happening to us. And also then we get in these facilitated conversations and little partner work and practicing skills around communication, which is the biggest part of being able to start these conversations.
Yeah.
And then yeah, like feel into our bodies, like, oh, what happens when we open our outer hips now? What happens when we open the front of the chest? Do we need to go more
Mm-hmm.
inward? And so it's kind of the both and of like, yes, the yoga can help us kind of cope with the heaviness and the complexity of this work. And it also is the doorway, I believe, into starting the work or cultivating a stronger, more committed relationship to this kind of work.
Right. Yeah. And so I envision this workshop being something that's accessible to people who have little to no yoga experience as well. Because correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems like it's going to be more basic yoga, like really accessible to all bodies and belief systems. And just, I would love to see people coming to this workshop who like wouldn't typically just go to a yoga practice, whether it's activists or social workers or anyone who doesn't necessarily have a strong tie to yoga. I see this as being something that could be a learning opportunity for them, a way to just like experience a little taste of yoga, but also just do important work without being intimidated by the yoga, because it can be intimidating both ways. Someone who doesn't have a yoga background, they see social justice, they're intrigued, but then they see yoga. And then somebody with a yoga background, they see social justice and they're like, well, I love Jennie Pearl's yoga classes, but the social justice thing is scary to me. So I feel like the way you're planning things, it's going to be accessible to everyone, whether you have a background in social justice or not, or yoga or not. It's, something for everyone.
Yes, that is very much my approach. And it's interesting hearing you articulate it like that, because I think that's very real. Like, and there's a reason, and part of my intention for this workshop is to also break down some of the barriers of why is a yoga studio class not a welcoming, safe place for everyone, right? Yeah. Why is that there? Why is there that stigma of what a yoga teacher looks like you or me? Like, why is that there? How do we break that down? How do we want to reevaluate that as a yoga community? Because yes, for folks that have been in my classes that know my yoga teaching style, they might have fear around the social justice component. And like you said, folks that don't know yoga, don't know me as a yoga teacher, who are more immersed in community work and diversity work, are like, the yoga piece, I don't know if I fit in there. And so I think that's really beautiful the way you just brought that up, because it's almost like we're trying to do the impossible here. Because there's not like there's just this binary thing, but there's often like the group of yoga people, and then we got the group that might be more interested in the racial justice component, and both bringing those together, it brings up a lot on both sides. So I appreciate you naming that. And I wanted to come back, if it's okay, to one more thing you brought up about people of color in the community of Flagstaff. Because I think this conversation comes up a lot, is like, and I see it and hear it in other communities that I work in outside of the Bay Area. I've been doing work up in the Northwest where it's predominantly white dominated spaces. And just as a little side note, the studios here in the East Bay of San Francisco, where I live, are also predominantly white dominated. So even in diverse communities, diverse cities, urban environments, the yoga studios are still very white dominated. And so I just say that to slow down the perception that maybe some people in Flagstaff might have, that like, oh, Jennie's doing this work and it's really good, but like she lives in this different environment, and like we're all pretty white and segregated in Flagstaff.
Sure.
And so I share that also because I really believe that if we don't look at our white dominated spaces and try to dismantle why is that happening in highly white environments like Flagstaff, then the system of oppression just continues, because Flagstaff is not the only place in the country that has a lot of white people. And I really believe that we need as many people on board to end racism, to stop these systems of oppression. And so within that, I see a lot of potential and hope within yoga communities, and the practice and the tools that so many folks already have in the yoga experience community can help access into that deeper healing that I really think that, like you and I speaking as two white women, that we need to do as well within ourselves. So whether or not I have a lot of people of color in my community, I believe that work is imperative. So I wanted to share that part, because I think that comes up a lot, and it's not just in Flagstaff, it's in communities I've been in the Northwest, like I said, that question comes up a lot. And just because I don't have as many people of color around me does not mean that this work is not important, vital, and necessary. And so even slowing down, what does it feel like walking into a yoga studio in Flagstaff when the people of color that you pass on the street, are they doing well? Are they not? Are you noticing? And what impact does that have on you and the people in your community? So I wanted to throw that in there.
Absolutely. That's helpful to know, like you're working in some places that are predominantly white, and that it's still important work to be doing no matter where you live. And one, I guess, synonym, or what I think to be a synonym that came up that helped me to understand your work a little more is like thinking of the word racism as pretty synonymous with colonialism. And like I use that word colonialism, and like that speaks to me in I feel a different way, because when I still hear the word racism, you know, there's that stigma of like, well, racism is using the N-word and, you know, beating up Black people, or like it. But I feel like colonialism is new and fresh enough in my mind that I'm like, oh yeah, like that's real. That's racism, just, you know, a different way to think about it. So I know we're starting to run out of time, and I could have opened like a whole new can of worms, but I feel like there are a lot of people in our community that relate to doing work against colonialism. And so I don't know what you would have to say about that.
Yeah, I think in this short bit of time that we have, I think another thing comes up is a lot of people might look at that and go, oh my gosh, 6 hours? We're really going to do that for 6 hours? But in these 15 to 20 minutes, just working one-on-one, imagining that we had a full group, I think we can get a sense of the complexity of the work and how it really does need more time. And then if we were doing meditation and work on the mat. So just as like a meta moment of like, this is an indicator of like, we're just kind of getting started just with two of us talking. And so just want to pause with that thought. So as far as racism and systems and colonialism, I think what I'd love to offer out is what I'm hearing underneath what you're saying is that when folks maybe in the Flagstaff community see the word racism, particularly white folks see the word racism, that maybe there's a kind of like racism means using the N-word, or racism is
I'm not racist.
I'm not racist, right? And so that's so much of what we can unpack together and hold each other with compassion of like, what does it mean to use certain language, and how does it feel, and what kind of defenses come up for those of us in the workshop that will be white or that are white. You know, there's I like to look at it as a system, right? And so in this country, we are in a system that says, you know, because I am white skinned, I get certain privileges, whether I want to believe that or not. And so kind of slowing that down and making it about a system, because what happens in the way most of us were taught growing up, high school, even in college, is that racism equals bad person. So when someone says, Rachel, you're racist, right? That can bring up a whole lot, and it equals most of the time a lot of defensiveness will come up, a lot of, oh my gosh, that means I'm the worst possible person on the earth, right? And so if they see something in my workshop flyer, like we're going to look at our own racism, like, wow, that probably sounds really scary, right? Yeah. It is scary, even if we're talking about it as systems. But part of my intent of the workshop and in the work that I do is really normalizing it and going, no, it's really not about me individually as a white woman being a bad person. It's about this system that's existing. And do I want to slow down enough in my privileged bubble as a white woman, yoga teacher, massage therapist? Do I want to slow that down enough to see like, what's the impact of me? What's the impact of me looking into that and doing more? And what's the impact of me going, oh, you know, yoga's pretty good. There's a lot of white people in my profession. We're doing okay. I don't have that many people of color around me, because even in the Bay Area, I could justify that.
Sure.
So yeah, my hope is to address those fears and be real with them, and know that folks that are coming in with that, I can almost guarantee you won't be the only one feeling that way about certain things like the word racism.
Right. Yeah. So Jennie, I'm wondering if there's a way people can reach out to you if they have further questions, like if email would be best, or Facebook, or I can leave your contact info in this link. So
I would love
Yeah.
that. I would absolutely love that. Whether it's nervousness, excitement, more questions, I welcome all of it.
Mm-hmm.
I've been loving for this work when I'm connecting with people. I've been using Facebook Messenger a lot because you can do that audio recording. And I think
Mm-hmm.
what trips people up a lot in this work is like getting the right words, like not knowing if I have the right words to articulate.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's nice to also get tone of voice. So I welcome text messages. I can offer my phone number, voice message or text on Facebook, and then email as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we will link all of Jennie's contact information. You're welcome to contact her or the yoga experience as well, with help signing up and making sure that you're able to do that. So yeah, I hope you'll consider joining us for Jennie's workshop. It's the weekend of August 18th and 19th, and all of our details are online, so you can find out more there. So thanks so
Great.
much, Jennie, for taking
Thank you. And
time
I
to
do feel
hear
compelled.
me out. And
Oh, sorry. Yeah, of course. Thank you for being real and honest. It's huge in this work, and that you modeled that so beautifully. I just do want to say I'm just aware, as two white women having this conversation, I want to articulate that there will be a lot of talk around whiteness, white supremacist culture,
mm-hmm.
in a white dominated space like the yoga experience. And likely there will be some people of color in the room. And so
Mm-hmm.
I especially want to reach out and say to people of color in the room, in the community, really please reach out and ask questions. And you are welcome in the space, knowing that coming in that there will be a lot of talk and probably a lot of white people in the space. So
Mm-hmm.
every person of color has a different level of comfortability. And also likely one of my co-facilitators, he won't be facilitating necessarily, but he's going to likely be coming with me, who I referenced earlier. His name is Aaron. He's an African heritage man. He's coming more as participating in the experience and getting more of a yoga practice. So
Mm-hmm.
likely there will be people of color there. So I just wanted
Yeah.
to name that. Like, we're talking a lot about whiteness and we're two white people. So
Mm-hmm.
that was important.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. Thank you. So good to see you. And I'm so appreciative of you holding space for people to have like real time conversations beyond their screens and social media, and just like bring some of these things to life and to shed light. So thank you.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
All right. Take care.
You too, Jennie. Bye.
Bye.